Then, a popular state senator is murdered. Just as shocking, police say the trigger man is his political rival.
It's a string of events that you couldn't write into a novel. It's crazy.
Dateline NBC Sunday. This is Dateline Sunday. November 1st, 1998. Tonight.
Somebody shot him right between the eyes. They murdered him.
He was the senator they could count on, a well-loved lawmaker, known for the help he gave, the jobs he saved. So why was he so violently killed?
I just can't imagine anyone doing this.
A cold-blooded murder in the heat of an election, and police say the evidence pointed to his opponent.
It's a string of events that you couldn't write into a novel. It's crazy.
Dennis Murphy on an election battle where the issue is murder. Also, he was a fresh new candidate running against an old-time favorite.
I must say that Byron appeared to be a very clean-cut, well-mannered, and actually charming person.
Was he really what he seemed? A bizarre political battle where the issue was murder.
We'll be right back.
Coming up next, he wanted to be a state senator, but did he want the job so badly he'd kill for it?
From our studios in New York, here again is Jane Pauley.
Tuesday's the day millions of Americans will be going to the polls to vote. And if you're like many, you've already had your fill of this fall's political attack ads. We've all seen how quickly campaigns can turn ugly. But you're about to see one that turned deadly. A politician running for a state Senate seat in Tennessee has been charged with murder, accused of killing his opponent in cold blood. Dennis Murphy reports on a bizarre political battle where the candidate is also the suspect.
They patched my niece through, and she said, "Uncle Horace, he's dead." Somebody shot him right between the eyes. They murdered him.
Who could have done such a thing to Tommy Burks, of all people? A 58-year-old hog farmer, church-going family man, state senator and legislator for nearly 30 years. He was found slumped in his truck on a gravel road of his 1,000-acre spread, dead of a single gunshot fired at close range. That's about all the sheriff's investigators would disclose at first.
There's not a lot more that our office would be willing to tell you at this time, although there is a lot more that is known at this time.
Oh Lord my God, when I in awesome wonder.
That weekend, Burks' friends from the Sycamore Church of Christ still weren't cried out over their loss, over his widow Charlotte's loss.
Of course, this has been a most unusual week, one of the saddest weeks in the history of our community.
Thousands had paid their respects at the senator's funeral. Politically, he was a good mirror of the rural central Tennessee he represented. Conservative Democrat, opposed to abortion, and thought schools should teach evolution only as a theory.
Tom was special to us because
His brother Horace said he had no idea how many lives Tommy had touched.
it seemed as though there was one person after another came and told me that Tom helped me get a job. Tom helped me with my Social Security. Tom brought me food when I was sick.
People out here across the state think this is a good bill.
There wasn't a doubt here that Tommy Burks would have been reelected. His token opponent, Byron Looper, the county tax assessor and perennial local candidate, had virtually not campaigned. There were no debates, no burning issues. A neighbor spoke for legions.
He's always helped everybody in the world, so he shouldn't have never had any enemy.
As officers combed the freeway looking for evidence, a tossed murder weapon was as hard to find as a motive for gunning down the senator.
There's a lot of details that we're going to have to find out through ballistics.
What was known about the case is that on a foggy Monday morning 2 weeks ago, Burks had arranged to show some school kids his pumpkin patch. The court document of a Tennessee Bureau of Investigation agent states that a key witness, Burks' farmhand, saw a man in a car pull up beside Tommy Burks. Then the farmhand said he heard a pop sound and looked in the rearview mirror to see that same car roaring up behind him, headed for the freeway. Investigators were tight-lipped, but they had their eyes on a suspect. Someone with a blue Chevy like the one the farmhand saw. Someone who officers thought was conspicuously absent from his home and office since the killing.
Anybody that should come in contact with him or see him should make no effort to approach him.
Just after 1 a.m. Thursday morning, police approached this wood frame house and arrested without incident the man who lived there. And as shocking as the murder of a well-loved legislator was the revelation of the man authorities accused of murdering Tommy Burks. It was Byron Looper, the 34-year-old Putnam County tax assessor and Burks' no-chance Republican opponent for his state Senate seat. He had been positively ID'd by the farmhand as the man behind the wheel of that car that sped off the Burks farm.
Mr. Looper, and stand, please, sir.
Looper, who attended West Point for a couple of years, was arraigned last Thursday. He appeared relaxed and smiling. He pleaded not guilty to a charge of first-degree murder. Lionel Barrett is his lawyer.
We have pled not guilty. There'll be a vigorous defense. We're going to do our own investigation.
Sheriff Butch Burgess says they've got their killer.
I feel very confident that we've arrested the correct person.
It's a string of events that you couldn't write into a novel. It's crazy.
Lawyer Henry Fincher of Cookeville, the county seat, has little regard for Looper. He sued him on behalf of a client who accused the tax assessor of forcing her to have sex against her will and making her pregnant, something Looper denies.
He doesn't think that the population is smart enough to understand him. Anybody that opposes him, he claims that they're part of some conspiracy that doesn't exist to set him up.
Most people only knew his name from the front page of the local paper, the Herald Citizen, where Looperisms were a fixture. Accounts of the young official stumbling into one political blunder after another.
To go from being a political gadfly, someone who's just kind of annoying to the population, to first-degree murder is a big jump.
Who really was this man so many had just dismissed as a crank and a political flake?
I must say that Byron appeared to be a very clean-cut, well-mannered, and actually charming person.
Joel Reimer and Jack Craig were first introduced to him back in '92 when they were leaders of the local Republican Party in an overwhelmingly Democratic district. Looper told them he dabbled in state house politics in Georgia as a Democrat and now had come back home to Tennessee to stand for office as a Republican. In '94, Looper ran for state representative and lost. But he came back in the summer of '96 with his eye on a courthouse job, tax assessor. Jack Craig was the party treasurer then and remembers a campaign strategy meeting at Looper's house. He asked Looper why he had a big stack of plywood propped up against the wall.
He said, well, you know, I had to do that. He said, you never can tell who's going to be outside this house. Somebody can hear through the wall at what business I'm conducting in my office. You'll never meet any individual that's more paranoid than this individual.
Looper, the tax assessor wannabe, dodged speaking to voters' forums and oddly disappeared altogether just 2 weeks before the election.
His own personal political skills, I would think, were probably in the basement.
Nonetheless, after defining himself as the champion of lower taxes, Byron Looper was elected tax assessor of Putnam County, Tennessee. Salary, $53,000 a year. Here at the courthouse, once he took over the tax assessor's office, Looper's behavior became even more erratic, according to his former supporters. On the few days a month that he actually showed up for work, he thought that his phones were tapped, that there was a TV camera hidden in the ceiling watching him. Reimer, who worked for Looper then as his office deputy, said one of his boss's first orders was to fire almost the entire staff. Then, after just 3 months, he fired Reimer.
He actually believed that they were spies, and they deliberately wanted to work there in order to sabotage his office.
I thought probably he was mentally disturbed.
Looper ran into confrontations right from the start. A growing number of political opponents accused him of illegally jacking up their tax assessments. And the courthouse was abuzz that the seldom-seen assessor had a personal bodyguard and wanted to issue his staff badges. And he was accused of using taxpayer money to fax out all across the state hateful press releases about elected officials. In March of this year, Byron Looper was indicted on 14 counts of theft and misuse of office. He called the investigation politically motivated. In his booking photo, he just smiled. 2 months later, he had his middle name legally changed from Anthony to Lotax and stood for election in a congressional primary. He was drubbed. Despite all his problems, an upcoming criminal trial, a paternity suit, Lotax Looper was able to round up the 25 signatures he needed to put himself on the ballot for yet another race, this time against the so far uncontested and regarded as unbeatable State Senator Tommy Burks.
The fellow out there farming is taking the risk.
The Republican Party wasn't funding what turned out to be a non-campaign. His one-time supporters were fed up with him.
He lied. He's not a man of integrity.
Now the man who was dismissed as a courthouse joke is accused of the unbelievably cold-blooded murder of his opponent. Looper's defenders in town are few.
Who do you think killed Tommy Burks?
I haven't a clue.
Lawyer Sam Harris, who describes himself as a good acquaintance of Looper, thinks maybe the assessor became the only suspect too quickly, a patsy.
There's nobody in town who can say, you're doing a great job as property assessor. But all that aside, does that make him a murderer?
There are people in Putnam County who think he was acting just flat out crazy. Did you see that?
No.
Behavior?
No.
Crazy guy?
No.
Looper is in a jail cell in the adjacent county charged with murder. But his name is not only still on the ballot, it's the only printed name voters will see here on the line for state senator. Tommy Burks' name has been covered over. His widow, Charlotte Burks, has agreed to let voters write in her name on the ballot out of support for Tommy, out of anger that a bullet shall not displace a ballot.
My thought right now is that's the thing for her to do.
If you'll fill that out for me, I need your name, address.
In early voting permitted in Tennessee, the election administrator is reporting that 9 voters out of 10 are asking for paper ballots. If ever a campaign was grassroots, it's this last-minute effort to write in Charlotte Burks' name. Lawyer Henry Fincher is organizing it.
Can we win it? Under normal circumstances, it would be insurmountable, but this is not a normal circumstance.
But strange things can happen in democracies. This man, Looper, sitting in the county jail, could be elected state senator. Yeah, conceivably, it could happen.
It definitely could happen. If people slow down, yeah, it could happen. And God help us all if it does.
Looper is still collecting his $53,000 a year assessor's salary as he sits in prison. A petition drive is underway to remove him from office.
Dateline is a presentation of NBC News. More Americans watch NBC News than any other news organization in the world.
You're watching NBC.